Hey guys, Spudknocker here, and today we're going to be taking a first look at the brand new AH-64D Apache. In this video, we're going to do a bit of a first impressions as well as give you guys some tips and tricks that I've come up with while learning to fly this very complex module. As I'm sure many of you guys realized, I was not around for release date due to my new flying job and moving into a brand new apartment. However, I am back and ready to make more videos covering the Apache and all other modules in DCS. When it comes to taxiing the AH-64D, all of your original fixed-wing tailwheel skills will apply. One thing to keep in mind is you want to always make sure when you're trying to re-lock your tailwheel that you get the tailwheel spun back to its original straight position in order to actually engage the locking pins. This is very similar to any of the fixed-wing tailwheel aircraft that you fly that have a tailwheel lock included with the aircraft. In this mission, we're conducting a border patrol in an Israeli Air Force AH-64D. We're kind of patrolling the border between Israel and Lebanon, looking for any suspicious activity, and we've been told that there may be some Hezbollah and Iranian-backed militia activity in one of the villages along the border, and we'd like to interdict them before they're able to launch any projectiles into Israel itself. So we can see a couple border guard locations here, an Israeli border guard, whereas the previous one was a UN peacekeeping force base. So we're just making sure the guys down there are doing alright. Give them a little bit of moto with our Apache flying over. It's really amazing to see how detailed the Syria map is. So at this point, we have our eyes on the village with the suspicious activity that's been reported. This is an hour-and-a-half mission that is condensed into 12-ish minutes here for you guys, so that way you guys don't have to spend so much time watching. Was unable to really get a bead on anything suspicious from that vantage point, so we're kind of repositioning the helicopter to get a better vantage point. Urban combat with the AH-64 is going to be very, very fun and interesting because you're going to really have to spend a lot of time looking for your targets. I tend to like using my Hellfires to destroy any armor or AAA batteries in the vicinity, so that way we can then get a little bit closer and engage with our rockets as well as our gun to mop up any survivors. So we can see that Hezbollah down there has a captured M113 APC from the Lebanese military. And we're just kind of working with the AI a little bit before we just go ahead and hop back into the pilot seat and reposition the helicopter here. To slide the helicopter left and right, it's kind of like doing a slip in a fixed-wing aircraft. We're just very gently pushing that stick left while adding in right rudder to keep the aircraft aligned straight while just sliding to the left here. It's a really fun and interesting skill that is very, very cool once you kind of have it down. Definitely make sure you're not over-controlling the Apache. It's all about teeny tiny stick and rudder movements for all these very gentle maneuvers. It's very, very easy to over-control this helicopter. When you're searching in an urban area, always make sure you're switching back and forth between FLIR and TV modes for your TADs, so that way you can use the strengths and weaknesses of both of those two systems in order to find targets effectively. So we found another Hezbollah M113 here, and we've just launched another Hellfire at him. Boom, got him. Shack. The Apache is really making combat in DCS much more gritty and up close and in your face. There's a reason why it's called low-level hell. In DCS, we're so used to be pulled so far out away from the battle space, up at 30,000 feet with a targeting pod. But here we're really right down in it, attacking targets while being able to see the actual guys running around down there as they run for their lives and get blown apart by high explosives and 30mm cannon rounds. So it's definitely a very different look at combat than we have had in the past. And as you guys can see here, rockets can be quite deadly accurate with the Apache if you know how to use the AI or communicate with your backseater correctly. For urban environments such as this, I highly recommend when you're engaging with Hellfires to use the pop-up mode for the missiles, so that way the missiles can come down around trees, buildings, etc. So that way you don't have to worry about the missile clipping a tree or the top of a building on its way to a target. And just repositioning the helicopter a little bit here. Trying to get a better vantage point on some of those vehicles down there. And another shack. Really trying to weed out any AAA units down there before moving in for closer engagements with rockets and or guns. And you'll see here that I have the nose of the helicopter actually pointed slightly to the right of where this truck is. That's going to allow me to basically throw a curveball with my Hellfire missile to curve around these trees and attack this target. Just like that. You saw that missile curving to the left around the trees to hit that truck hidden behind a tree. It's pretty darn cool. And we can see the infantry around these convoys running around trying to get away from these explosions. Definitely gives a more brutal look to warfare in DCS World. Very, very interesting, and is why the upcoming Apache focused campaign that I'm putting together is going to be a much more kind of brutally realistic kind of take on warfare. And of course we can get the aircraft repositioned so that way we get a better vantage point on any of these vehicles down here before we switch back to the gunner seat. And that looks like a AAA piece down there, so we'll make sure we take that out with a Hellfire. And with all this clutter, these trees, these buildings, this is where the pop-up mode of the Hellfire really, really shines. Because if we had tried to do a direct attack or a direct launch on that ZU-23 down there on the truck, we would have hit that tree or building as a result. And we're really just standing up, actually inside the borders of Israel, firing into Lebanese territory with our Hellfires, taking out armor, trucks, anything that's going to be a nuisance or potentially cause a danger to the state of Israel from Hezbollah fighters along the border here. And we can see a bunch of infantry and some trucks here, so we'll saturate the area with some rockets. Trying to just make sure that we loose all of our Hellfires on anything that can potentially shoot back at us before we get in close. Of course, using my laser rangefinder to find the range to those targets before entering in the actual range for my rockets to make them as deadly accurate as possible.
Roger, aligning.
For controlling the TADEC here in the Apache to align the TADs and engage targets with weapons, I'm actually using an Xbox controller. And it is a fantastic way of controlling these systems and all the various buttons on the hand controllers and being very, very accurate and very precise and quick with it. And I'm being engaged by a M2 Browning machine gun that's actually on one of those M113s that we missed. So we're just going to quickly dive out of the way here. You can hear some of those 50 cal rounds striking our tail boom. And we're gonna duck back across the border, back into Israel. And popping out some flares just in case. Don't really have any intelligence that Hezbollah has any man pads in this area, but still better safe than sorry in that respect. Now, in real life, Israel doesn't really utilize rockets for their AH-64s all that often. For the most part, you're gonna see loadouts on Israeli Apaches that consist mostly of external drop tanks and Hellfires. The reason being, Israel is very, very concerned about collateral damage, and rockets aren't necessarily the most accurate weapon to be using in densely populated areas, such as we're using right now. So they tend to go after and use Hellfires far more often than rockets. So we'll just go ahead and now that we are Winchester, we are going to cruise on back to our airfield in order to complete the mission. So, in my opinion, the Apache is a fantastic module. I think a lot of people's complaints right now about it tend to be from a place of not understanding the systems. When I first hopped into the Apache a couple days ago, there was no way I was going to be able to make a video for you guys because things were so complex, so foreign, and so new. But once I started digging into it, a lot of my complaints about the module actually disappeared as I started to understand how the helicopter works, how its systems work, how to really control it. Be very, very gentle while flying this helicopter. It is extremely responsive, and it will buck you around like a bucking bronco, and you will crash every time if you over-control it. But if you just barely move your stick around, just barely move the collective around, it's going to be a lot better for you guys. When it comes to doing anything in the Apache, just be patient with it. Don't try to fly too fast, don't try to fly too slow, and you'll be a-okay. I believe this is probably one of the more complex, if not the most complex module in DCS World from an avionics and weapon systems standpoint. Again, I highly recommend that if you're a co-pilot gunner, to use an Xbox controller for your TADEC and hand grips. It's a really awesome solution to allow you to really quickly acquire targets and engage those targets precisely and as fast as possible. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this little look at flying an Israeli Apache in a typical kind of border patrol operation that Israel utilizes their Apaches for on a day-to-day basis. You know, usually not firing that many ordnance, but to keep an eye on the border areas and to support ground troops, peacekeeping forces, things of that nature. So please, like and subscribe, and fly safe out there, guys, and we'll see you in the next one. I think the Apache is definitely going to be a fan favorite, and it's definitely going to pull a lot of new folks into DCS World as a result.